So we got Robin and Raymond's joining us back. So it's a Q&A session now. So anyone have questions? If you do, please raise your hand and we will bring the microphone to you. Yes, we'll bring the mic right up to you.
Hi, Heather Pugh. I was 43 when I was first diagnosed. My mother was diagnosed with a smaller tumor when she was 72, so they sent me to a genetic specialist across from Princess Margaret. I recall her saying to me that after everything came back, that there was no genetic things at the time, that I should probably contact her in a couple of years type thing, because as they discover more mutations or whatever, that there might be further testing that they would do. Do you know, off the top of your head, in the last few years, are there more discoveries of new genes or mutations that I should go back for more testing?
Yes, so genetic testing has gotten much more cheaper because of next generation sequencing. So just to give you an idea, to complete the Human Genome Project, it took us 20 years and $3 billion. Now to sequence somebody's genome, it takes about 3 months and about $1,500, right? So because of that technology, we're able to interrogate many, many genes. And you have to be cognizant that sometimes things in the scientific literature take time to get into the clinic. So you probably saw somebody in my clinic before I started working there, which is across the street from Princess Margaret. And certainly I know that in the past couple of years, these gene panels have become more comprehensive and faster. So probably it's time for you to come back to see if you have a change in another gene. So you'll probably be seeing me, okay?
Okay. That sounds ominous. Stay after school. Okay, anyone else have a question here? Okay.
Hi, is there a combined site where you can find out about all trials that are going on throughout Canada, or you have got to go to the individual hospitals?
For Kidney Cancer Canada? So actually,
www.clinicaltrials.ca.
we would prefer they go to kidneycancercanada.ca. Yeah.
That was one of my slides that was cut off.
That's the best site for kidney cancer clinical trials, I believe. Am I correct?
OntarioCancerTrials.ca is another one.
Okay.
That's a good one for more local ones, but I'm sure the kidney cancer would have it on there.
We stay pretty much up to date, do we not?
We also have references.
Yeah, so they're there. We have all the links. So
clinicaltrials.gov. I mean, that's the big one, and that's mandatory registration in that for trials conducted in the United States. And in Canada, it's strongly encouraged if you want to do any publications. But that's there are several websites that are reputable.
Mm-hmm.
That you can go on.
We really, being a stage 4 guy, I really need to know what the one is that gets up to date. So
kidneycancercanada.ca will have the most up to date. And if you call in at any given time, our team will help you navigate that through. Perhaps, Raymond, you can talk a little bit about, I've talked about this in previous forums, but tissue repositories for testing. Is that something you get involved in, or?
Yeah, so the tissues are so tissues are normally kept by the pathologists. So having the pathologist involved is very key. And depending on the hospital, there are research biobanks where you can contribute your genetic or your tumor tissue to that biobank, and then it becomes sent for research. And then also you can have it in a clinical biobank. So depending on your hospital and depending on where it is, it's certainly possible. It's certainly something that I am interested in, because moving forward, we do have to look at the tumor and the blood and the family. So it's a challenge because there are logistical and regulatory benchmarks that are required for biobanks in terms of privacy, how long do you keep them, etc. From my point of view, though, the legacy that a cancer patient can leave to their family is a sample of their DNA. So if you can leave your DNA and try to bank it somewhere, that's something that I would strongly encourage all cancer patients to do.
And Neil?
So just a couple of comments about that. The tissue, the CCIS database, which KCC is also co-sponsoring, is going to have tissue in that database as well. So as we move forward, the next step in that database. Hopefully all you guys are already in there. Your information is, we're going to have repository of tissue in that database as well, so we can do genetic testing as we need moving forward. A lot of individual centers have their tissue already banked. So, for example, if you've had surgery by myself, your tissue is already banked at in Hamilton somewhere.
Is
So
that done automatically?
it's
'Cause
done
I know
automatically,
that-
yeah. So every patient that gets consented for CECUS and gets also consented for the tissue bank, your tissue is already banked in our hospital. So we have a lab where it's all banked, and Princess Margaret does something similar, I believe, as well as some of the other major centers. So the tissue is already there, and it can be accessed as the genetic piece moves forward. Along those lines as well, I want to talk about clinical trials as well. I think that we've had some discussion at our table that some of the smaller communities, oncology centers, they don't offer clinical trials. So, for example, in our LIN, we have the Walker Cancer Center, which is a fantastic cancer center, but they don't offer a lot of clinical trials. And we just talked about St. Joe's in Toronto. They don't offer a lot of clinical trials as well. And every patient should be offered a clinical trial. I think Robin's been very clear about that, about what's happened is that we would not have nivolumab, we would not have sunitinib or pazopanib without clinical trials. We would still be giving interferon. So because of those clinical trials and your patient's commitment, we're able to get those drugs registered. But now we have other trials that are ongoing. And so all the major cancer centers in Canada are offering a first-line PD-1 trial. So if you, any first-line patients, and we're also all offering a second-line PD-1 trial. This is London, Hamilton, Toronto, Sunnybrook, all those centers. So if you're at a community site, which is fantastic care, in Kitchener or in Niagara Falls or St. Joe's, Toronto, wherever, you should request if there's any clinical trial, you should be referred to at Princess Margaret or JCC or London or Ottawa, or wherever the major trials are. So always be offered a trial. KCC does have an up-to-date website on the clinical trials, but also clinicaltrials.gov. These are all resources you can access to find out the latest trials. We try to make sure that that site is up to date, but there's also investigator-initiated trials. Investigator-initiated trials are trials that, as Robin was saying, is that where an investigator such as George Bjarnson has offered a trial where he's doing dose escalation of patients on sunitinib. That's a fantastic trial. Many patients are benefiting from that, and we're also sites of that. But other sites may be offering trials which is just at that center. And they have to be registered to clinicaltrials.gov. We try to get them on KCC, but if not, you can also check that website as well. The thing about cost for these trials, the trial costs for these new PD-1 drugs, which again about $110,000 a year, they're absorbed by the sponsor of the trial. So you don't have to pay anything, you're not out of pocket any cost, so you're getting this drug at no cost, which is great for our patients. The pharmaceutical companies, it takes about $1 billion to get these to market. So it's a huge commitment from the pharmaceutical companies, and we're being inundated with the regulatory paperwork now. The regulatory paperwork to get trials up and running and a drug to market is $1 billion, and also it's a lot of paperwork for everybody. So this is all to protect patients' rights. You've heard about that migraine thing that happened in France and in phase 1 and phase 2 trials. These are all things to put in place to protect us, but it does take some time to get all this stuff to going. So just a plug, as Robin has done a great job to get everybody involved in a trial, especially if you're at a community center. It really behooves you to look into this to get offered a trial which will benefit you. So that's what I wanted to say. That's my question to myself.
I'm not sure when we allowed the doctors to take the microphones at these patient conferences, but anyway, I just want to mention a study that Kidney Cancer Canada did regarding clinical trials a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, where we found out that 56% of metastatic patients had never been offered a clinical trial. So we really hope that that number is changing now. But don't depend on my personal advice as a patient is don't expect your doctor to bring it up to you, that you have to take the onus on yourself. Call us and we'll help you try to navigate clinicaltrials.gov because it's not an easy experience for somebody who's never been in there. So that's a role that Kidney Cancer Canada plays. And just one last thing with clinical trials, and I'm not sure if you agree with this, but I often, when we're talking to patients, they say, you know what, I'll do a clinical trial when I'm out of options. And we'd really like to flip that paradigm around to say, think of a clinical trial first while you are the most healthy, because that's likely when you're going to be accepted into the clinical trial. Maybe there'll be a trial for you afterwards, further down the line, but think about them early, think about them often. ask questions before you visit your doctor. If you're coming up to decision time, call us and we'll help navigate and see what trials might have just opened at a cancer center near you, but it might not be where you're currently being treated. So you may have to switch one cancer center over and you can always go back afterwards. It's all good.
Okay, we have a question at the back. Let's go to the back.
Yeah, hi. For Dr. Kim, I had my surgery for clear cell RCC when I was 40 with no family history. So I was wondering, should I be looking at testing, genetic testing?
Yes.
Okay, and then that being said, whether I test positive for it or not, would my son be at risk?
Depends on the gene. So it depends on the gene, and it depends on not necessarily the mutation, but it depends on the gene. So you're getting into a little bit of medical genetics. So the question always comes is, do I test my child now? And usually, depending on the gene, if it affects the child's health, we do test the child. But the question of insurance and genetic stigma and discrimination based on genetic makeup comes up. So if it doesn't affect their health, we usually reserve that until they become adults. And then by the time they're late teens to early 20s, as long as they're not at risk of developing a medical problem before then, we allow them to have the genetic testing then.
So how would you access that then, Raymond?
What do you mean, how do we
Like, I mean, he says, should I get tested? You say yes. Now what does he do?
He gets his doctor referral to me, right? Raymond Kim, Princess Margaret.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other patients? Let's do here. Yep.
I just had a question. My father, at age 51, was diagnosed and quickly died from brain tumors. Now, I don't know, this was in the end of the 60s. I don't know if they were actually the primary or not, but that's what killed them quite quickly. And then I was diagnosed with my kidney cancer at age 51. And I've always wondered if there could be a correlation. I know back in the 60s when I was a young child, they told the family not to worry, brain cancer wasn't genetic. You don't have to worry about it. But now I wonder, knowing that it can metastasize to the brain, would it be worth genetic testing for me if his was brain is all they told us?
So it really depends on the type of tumor that you had, and usually before I get inundated with referrals, I generally, it's good, that's why I'm here, is we try to look step by step. So I would review your medical record. It's certainly, because you see me, a lot of patients actually don't get genetic testing because part of my job is to say, no, it's probably not, or no, it doesn't fit with one of the genes that we're currently aware of. And then I tell them to come back in a couple of years when we find the gene that's associated with kidney and, toe tumor, right? But in your case, if it's brain and kidney, depending on the histology of your kidney, I would want to have a look. Because if it was papillary, it's less likely it's related to the brain. If it's clear cell, it might be related to the brain. So certainly, I'd be happy to see you. Right?
Okay, I've been promising to get over here. Do we have a mic over there? Yep, we'll go right there. Nicole? And then we'll come here.
Okay, this is like a bit out of the subject, but it is in a way. Clinical trials are really important, and they're important for patients especially for patients who have no other options. Deb is right, you don't wait to be there to ask for it. So I'm just going to address the question to Dr. Kapoor and those people here, Dr. Kim and everybody else. How do we get trials for rarer forms of kidney cancers? Because those are the patients who first have no treatment, and second, who are currently not necessarily being admitted in those trials. So what can we as Kidney Cancer Canada do to make that better for those patients? Am I dreaming?
Neil, do you want to take that?
You want to? I can.
So that's a great question. I think something great. I don't want to cystoscopy, so I better talk in this. So I think that's a great question. And the whole issue of non-clear cell trials has always been a topical one, and that's where we have an unmet need. So that's one of the unmet needs, priorities of the Kidney Cancer Research Network, trying to get non-papillary studies, chromophobe studies. We don't have anything for chromophobe. Collecting duct carcinoma, these are very rare cancers that we don't have a lot of trials for, and no agents that we've determined. I don't know how to cure that, how to fix that, but other than just keep lobbying for these drugs to be studied. What Kidney Cancer Canada can do is continue the lobby effort to the governments and support CIHR trials. So because no pharmaceutical company will probably support that, getting CIHR studies going, so you have investigators that are interested in these kind of non-clear cell histologies, putting together trials and having it funded by the government. That's really the way to get this done, and that's just lobbying and fundraising to get these out there. Kidney Cancer Canada has already done a great job by your fundraising efforts to put together funded fellowships for doctors to study these drugs, and I think those are where we do just fundraising, so we can award fellowships and grants to have these non-clear cell histology studied.
Thank you.
So for me, I don't deal with non-hereditary cancer patients, but because non-clear cell is a rarer histology, I think from my end, what I do try to do is I try to collect all of these families. So even if you have a rare cancer, I'm actually even rarer, right? So the patients I see are even rarer because not all non-clear cells have a hereditary form of cancer. So what I do and what I can do is I can collect these families, and then I can work with these families by shepherding them into the appropriate trial that matches their genetic mutation. And I believe by taking care of these families that we will learn the most from them, and hopefully from this end, and Neil and KCC working from the top end, we can find something to close this gap.
Thank you. Pat?
Yeah, a question. My husband and I both got clear cell renal cell in our 60s and 70s, which is, but both of us, got it at the same time kind of thing. And the question came up to us about, what about our children? Now, we are basically told that our daughters should be maybe have an ultrasound every 3 years or something. And so my question would be, should we look into that further genetically? And then, the whole issue of maybe banking DNA just for the future, because it's, we're kind of a rarity in terms of both of us being.
Yeah, so it would be certainly interesting to see what happens to your children, because just having clear cells at the age of 60 is actually quite common, right? But your family, your generations down the line are actually going to be quite interesting. So it would be very useful for you to bank a sample of DNA. I think it's very reasonable for your kids to have ultrasounds, despite there being very poor evidence. But in kidney cancer, we don't have much evidence, right? It's not like breast and colorectal. So, yeah, I think it would be interesting. Right now, I can't think of any genes that I would think of, but certainly it would be. I'm saying yes to everything, which is...
Okay. Well, let's thank our final panel of the day. Thank you so much.